This is Sophie and Jumong, Part 30. Let me know where you're listening from and the time there. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. Thank you. The ballroom of the five-star hotel shimmered like a golden dream. Crystal chandeliers spilled light over round tables draped in ivory linen. Sophie stood near the center of the room in an off-shoulder cream satin dress, her hair swept up in soft curls. She had changed after the ceremony, but the sapphire ring still gleamed on her finger, catching everyone's eyes. Her joy was quiet but radiant, the kind that bloomed from within. Beside her stood Gina, glowing in emerald green, laughing as she introduced her parents to faculty members. Her father, Dong Hyun, feeling proud, hugged his daughter and whispered, "Am very proud of you, Gina," while her mother held back tears every time she looked at her daughter. "My pharmacist," she whispered to anyone who would listen. Across the room, Chairman Lee stood tall in a navy tuxedo, a rare smile softening his usually kind gaze, thinking about how God had loved him so much to give him back his brother. He then whispered to himself, "Thank you, God." Madam Lee was present, dressed immaculately in deep burgundy with pearls at her neck. She greeted guests with grace, sipping her champagne carefully. Her eyes never stayed long on Sophie, but she didn't withdraw either. There was something resigned, yet peaceful, about her demeanor tonight. Elias floated through the room with a clipboard and a wine glass, double-checking music cues and event timing, but mostly just grinning. He'd known about the proposal, and watching the entire world melt when Sophie said yes, that made every second of secrecy worth it. Jumong entered the room just after Sophie had finished greeting one of her old professors. He wore a white dinner jacket with black trousers, a subtle gold pin on his lapel. The room quieted for a breath, not because of his status, but because of the way he walked toward her. He didn't rush. He didn't need to. When he reached Sophie, he offered her his hand like it was something sacred. She placed hers in it, and he leaned in to whisper, "Are you real?" She laughed, her eyes glassy. "If this is a dream, don't wake me up." The music shifted. Elias signaled to the band. "Ladies and gentlemen," he called out, tapping his glass, "can we raise our glasses for a toast?" The room turned toward the couple. Jumong stood beside Sophie, still holding her hand. Elias continued. "To the surgeon who healed hearts before she ever held a scalpel. To the man who believed in her enough to kneel in front of the world. To Sophie and Jumong, may this be the first of many celebrations and never the last." Everyone clinked their glasses, even Madam Lee. The first dance followed, not between bride and groom, but between promise and peace. The party had ended, but Madam Lee's heart had not rested. The lights were low in her private bedroom on the second floor of the Han estate, and the music from the ballroom below had long faded into silence. But inside her, something stirred, loud, sharp, unrelenting. It wasn't music. It wasn't noise. It was shame. She sat alone at her vanity. Her eyes were swollen from the tears that wouldn't stop falling. The television was still on. A replay of the graduation ceremony was being broadcast on the national channel. And there it was again, Jumong at the podium, that powerful voice, that quiet strength, that prayer. A prayer, he said, was inspired by Sophie's mother. Madam Lee stared blankly as the screen showed Jumong, hand outstretched, asking the audience, "Do you believe in love?" The crowd roared, "Yes!" "Do you believe love can heal?" "Yes." Madam Lee's breath hitched. Her shoulders trembled. She reached out with a shaking hand and turned the television off. The room fell into silence. Her hand remained over her chest, gripping the fabric like she was trying to still her heartbeat. And then, almost like something inside broke, the first real sob escaped her lips. Uncontrolled, Madam Lee cried. She cried not like a socialite who had lost her dignity, not like a matriarch losing power. She cried like a woman who realized she had once loved a child and then threw him away. She cried for the little boy she once called her own, Chairman Lee's son, the orphaned boy she had embraced when she married into the Han family. She cried because she remembered the day she stopped seeing him as her son, the day He Jin was born. She cried because of what she had done after that, The way she had locked him away in a dark room, how he screamed through the night, how rats ran across his feet and he had no one. And worst of all, how she left him in another city, cold and alone, for over 3 weeks, and never looked back. She whispered in a trembling voice, "God, what have I done?" Her thoughts ran wild, to the moment Jumong showed Jin the confession, the video where she had admitted all of this. Her cruelty, her hatred, her belief that he was never worthy of being a Han. Her words, full of bitterness, now echoed like curses in her mind. She had called him a stain, a threat, a nobody. The way Jin had looked at her after that, disappointed, silent. The truth was, for years, she had confused control with love. She had tried to mold her family into symbols of power and image, but in doing so, she had bruised hearts, bruised a child. She whispered again as tears rolled into her palms. "Maybe it's not too late." A knock came at the door. She wiped her eyes quickly but couldn't hide the redness. "Come in," her voice cracked. The door creaked open, and Jin stepped in softly, wearing a cozy sweater and jeans. Her makeup was gone. She was no longer the poised socialite, just a daughter walking gently into her mother's pain. "Mom." Madam Lee turned, eyes wide with guilt, like a child caught in something wrong. "Jin," she whispered, trying to compose herself. "You should be asleep." "I saw the light," Jin said softly, walking closer. "And I heard you." She pulled up the soft chair across from her mother and sat down. She took one look at her, the shaking hands, the wet eyes, and instead of judgment, she reached for a tissue and gently passed it over. Madam Lee took it, fingers trembling. I'm so ashamed," she admitted. "I don't even know where to begin." Jin looked at her for a long moment. Her voice was low, like she didn't want to break the fragile air between them. "Then begin here," she said, "by saying you're ready to change." Silence. Then a nod, a slow, aching nod. "I am. I want to. But I've done so much damage. Will your father ever forgive me? Will Jumong ever forget what I did to him?" Jin hesitated, then leaned forward and took her mother's hand. "I don't know," she said honestly. "But I believe in grace. I believe in trying." Madam Lee let out another sob, covering her face again. "I don't deserve them." Jin reached out and pulled her into a hug, a mother in her daughter's arms. And for the first time in decades, Madam Lee allowed herself to be small. She wept into Jin's shoulder, letting herself crumble. And Jin, gently stroking her back, whispered, "It's never too late, Mom. I promise you. If your heart is changing, it's not too late." They stayed like that for a long while, until Madam Lee finally exhaled, deep and long, like letting go of a life she no longer wanted to live. Then Jin smiled softly and kissed her forehead. "Come on, tomorrow's a big day. You need your strength." Madam Lee looked at her with hope glimmering behind tired eyes. "Do you think your father could ever look at me again the way he used to?" Jin paused. Then with a tear in her eye, she whispered, "Let me go ask him." Down the hallway, Jin stood outside her father's study, her hand poised gently on the carved wooden door. She took a breath. It wasn't fear that made her hesitate. It was love. Deep, genuine love for the man who had been steady like a mountain through every storm. Tonight, she wasn't here to ask for favors. She was here to bring peace. She knocked twice, a soft, familiar rhythm. "Come in," Chairman Lee's voice answered from within, calm and resonant. She opened the door slowly. Jin," he said with a gentle smile. "You're still awake." She stepped in and slowly walked toward him. He gestured to the seat beside him. "Come, sit." She did, folding her hands neatly in her lap, like a child once again seeking comfort in her father's presence. But this time, she also brought with her the strength of a woman learning to love better. "Appa," she began softly, her eyes already glimmering. "Can I tell you something from my heart?" Chairman Lee looked at her fully, sensing the weight in her voice. "Always. I didn't like Sophie at first. The honesty was so bare it startled even her. But she continued, holding her father's gaze. "I didn't even know why," she said, shaking her head. "Maybe I thought she didn't belong. Maybe I was protecting Mom's pride. I'm not sure. But the truth is, she had done nothing to me. Nothing. Chairman Lee waited, listening. And then one day, Heijin went on, she's a quiet woman, about 60, very sweet. She said something to me. She said, "You will never taste happiness if your heart wishes sadness on others." And it hit me. Her voice cracked. I realized I was punishing someone simply for existing, for being kind, for loving the man I once called brother. Chairman Lee's eyes grew tender. She smiled through tears. So, I decided to change. I started telling myself every day, you have no right to dislike what you don't understand. And slowly, I stopped looking at Sophie like a threat. I started seeing her like someone who belonged, someone who could make even a hard heart soften. Chairman Lee reached over and placed his hand gently on her head, brushing her hair back like he used to when she was a little girl. "You've grown," he said softly. "I see it in you." She took his hand in both of hers and held it tightly. "I just came from Mom," she whispered. "Appa, she's changing. I saw her cry today like I've never seen her cry before. Not for pride, not for shame, but for regret." Chairman Lee's expression grew somber. "She regrets what she did to Jumong," Heijin said. "She regrets what she said to you. She remembers the night you danced with her yesterday and how gentle you were. It broke something in her. She's hurting, and she's afraid it might be too late." A deep silence followed. Then Heijin's voice softened even further. "I know you've carried pain for many years, Appa. I know you've stayed kind even when you were hurt. But I want to ask, is there a space in your heart to forgive her?" Chairman Lee didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked past her, toward the window. After a long moment, he finally said, "If she truly changes, then yes, there is space." Heijin exhaled, her eyes brimming again. "She'll need time," she said, "but I think she's finally ready to take the first step." They sat quietly after that, hands still clasped. Chairman Lee studied his daughter's face, so full of hope, so full of warmth. She had inherited his strength, but somewhere along the way, she had also found her mother's softness. He saw both in her now, finally balanced. Then his expression changed, lightened, curious. "I'm proud of you," he said, "and I'm glad you came tonight because there's someone I'd like you to meet." Heijin tilted her head. "A guest?" He nodded slowly. "A very special one. Someone from my past. Someone I should have introduced long ago." Heijin's eyes widened slightly with curiosity. "And who is it?" Chairman Lee smiled but kept the name to himself for now. "You'll meet them soon," he said. "Tomorrow, perhaps." Heijin giggled softly. "You're being mysterious now, Appa." He leaned back in his chair and chuckled. "Some stories take time," he said, "but yours tonight was the beginning of a healing one." Heijin stood and hugged him gently, her arms around his shoulders. "I love you, Appa," she whispered, "and I'm proud of you, too." He embraced her back firmly, warmly. "And I love you, my daughter. Thank you for being brave." As she pulled away, she smiled with bright eyes. "I'll go sleep now. I want to be fresh for this guest." Chairman Lee nodded. "You will not be disappointed." She paused at the door, turned back one more time, and whispered, "Maybe it's not too late for all of us." And with that, she left, leaving behind a room lit not only by lamps but by possibility. The morning sun filtered gently through the tall arched windows of the Lee family mansion. It was a morning that didn't shout with fanfare. It whispered, elegant and intimate. Sophie sat at the far end of the table, dressed in a soft ivory morning robe, her engagement ring catching the sunlight every time she lifted her teacup. Her braided hair was pinned loosely, and despite the luxury of her surroundings, there was still something deeply grounded and humble in her demeanor. She looked like a woman who had been crowned with love. Jumong entered the room quietly, his presence tall and assured. He wore an open white shirt tucked into well-fitted black trousers. A silver watch gleamed at his wrist, but the true sparkle was in his eyes the moment they met hers. He walked over slowly, leaned down, and kissed the top of her head with a warm reverence that needed no words. "Good morning, my fiancé," he whispered near her ear. Sophie blushed and tilted her head up toward him. "Good morning, my future husband." A soft laugh passed between them, full of tenderness. Breakfast was served by the quiet staff and consisted of fresh croissants, spiced fruit compote, fluffy scrambled eggs, and 2 cups of herbal tea in delicate porcelain cups. There was no grand feast, just perfection in the small details. Jumong took his seat beside her instead of at the head of the table, reaching for her hand before lifting his fork. "Did you sleep well?" he asked. Sophie nodded. "I did, but I think I smiled in my sleep the whole night." He smiled back, amused. "That explains why you looked like a dream when I woke up." They both laughed. The sound filled the room gently, like wind through silk curtains. After a few minutes of comfortable silence and eating, Sophie glanced at him. "So, where do we begin? With the wedding, I mean," she said, tracing the rim of her teacup. Jumong leaned back and looked at her thoughtfully. "You tell me, what would make you feel the most at home, the most yourself?" She hesitated for a moment, then spoke softly. "I want to get married in Namibia." Jumong blinked once, then slowly smiled. "Namibia," he echoed. "Then that's where we'll go." Her eyes widened. "You don't mind?" He reached for her hand again, squeezing it gently. "I want to see the land that raised you. I want to walk those streets, meet every neighbor who watched you grow up. That's not something I'd ever mind. It's a privilege." Sophie's lips trembled slightly. She blinked back tears, but her smile remained. "You really mean that?" "With all my heart," he said. As the laughter died down, Jumong reached for his orange juice but paused mid-air. "Actually," he said, as if remembering something, "I've been thinking." Sophie raised a curious brow. "About?" "About how we're going to build this life together. Not just love and family," he said, then leaned closer, eyes twinkling. "But purpose, too." "I'm listening," she said, eyes narrowing playfully. He tapped the edge of the table twice, a nervous little habit when something mattered deeply to him. "I want you and Gina to work at one of my hospitals," he said. "Not as a favor, not to be generous, but because I've watched you. I've seen how you handle crisis, how you speak to people in pain, how you stood over Gina's hospital bed. You're meant for that world. And any hospital would be lucky to have you." Sophie blinked. "You're offering me a job?" "I'm inviting you into a mission," he replied seriously. "You know I've been building a hospital branch focused on underrepresented communities, one that actually listens to the patients. I want someone like you to lead that kind of team. And Gina? She's a brilliant pharmacist. I already asked her yesterday and she looked like she was about to faint." Sophie burst out laughing. "She probably did." "Don't worry," he added, grinning. "I told her it's optional. But she said yes. She told me this was the only hospital where she'd want to work, where her best friend was also walking the halls." Sophie leaned back in her chair, the joy radiating through her. "So, I won't be a stay-at-home wife after all?" Jumong laughed. "Unless you want to be. In which case, I'll buy you 7 silk robes and build you a palace." "No way," Sophie said, grinning. "I want my scrubs, my patients, and my cup of bad hospital coffee." "Done," he said. "But only if you let me sneak in for coffee breaks and pretend I'm one of the patients just to steal a minute with you." "You'd do that?" "I've done worse for your attention." Their laughter echoed through the high-ceilinged room. It wasn't just about teasing or even planning anymore. It was about seeing how their lives would entwine, not just in vows and ceremonies, but in day-to-day decisions, in shared purpose, in mutual respect. Sophie reached across the table and took his hand again. "You're not just marrying me," she whispered. "You're building with me." "And I couldn't ask for a better partner," he said. Outside, the breeze stirred the olive trees on the estate. Inside, 2 lives were weaving into one, layer by layer, dream by dream.